Some people are familiar with Christopher Hitchens. You should go on YouTube and see some of his discussions and debates. He's been on a lot of different shows, and he was one person that would defend even unpopular opinions in a controversial and in front of an unfriendly crowd. So he was a brave man. So I'll begin in Hitchens' style. Good afternoon, brothers and sisters, comrades and friends, if I may. We've organized this day in celebration and reflection on the lives of two great men, Thomas Jefferson and Christopher Hitchens. They're two heroes of mine. They're two men of historic intellectual caliber, both worthy of praise, but not adulation. I agree with much of what they said and did, but not all. And I certainly consider them to be two of the greatest advocates of free speech ever. Jefferson gave it to us, and Hitchens showed us how to use it. Christopher Hitchens may be familiar to some of you, but those of you that don't know him, he was an atheist, a writer, a polemicist, a Marxist, a progressive, an agitator, and so on. He wrote for numerous publications. He was renowned for his public speaking, and he was a strident anti-theist. He was one of the four horsemen of the new atheist movement. He debated preachers and apologists of every sect in public in front of their audiences. He was one of the, he made numerous appearances on TV shows like Bill O'Reilly, Lou Dobbs, Joe Scarborough, and many others. He was famously disinvited on air from ever appearing on Sean Hannity's show ever again. Unfortunately, he died of esophageal cancer in 2011. Hitchens was he was around free speech advocate. He stood up bravely to defend people he had even profound political and philosophical differences with. Free speech is a principle, I think, which distinguishes free societies from all others. Free speech and its corollary freedoms, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and so on, are what distinguishes free countries from oppressive ones. In America and the West, we have taken on the moral hazard of free speech, bravely and admirably for over 200 years. So I immediately take offense when it is advanced that some public outrage is imperiling society, and free speech therefore needs to be reined in. Americans are braver and hardier than even we believe, and well able to survive hurtful words and offensive pictures and even incitations to bad behavior. Christopher Hitchens spoke a great deal about free speech and was not shy about his admiration for Thomas Jefferson or the Constitution of the United States. He was many things politically and economically. One thing, I believe, which ties his whole career together is anti-totalitarianism. Christopher Hitchens made principled stands that few of us would even have the moral courage to fight for. He, for example, defended the World War II historian and Holocaust revisionist Stephen Irving, and came under great condemnation for it, particularly from the left in the US and Europe, and even risked being banned from such scenic countries as Austria due to their strict laws against pro-Nazi literature and Holocaust denial. He attacked such laws, pointing out that using state censorship is precisely how fascists would react. And the leftist anti-fascist warriors have apparently missed the irony in their actions. We've seen numerous calls from inside the US and elsewhere to establish hate speech laws. I agree with the late contrarian that such laws would immediately be put to ill use and cause irreparable harm to our free society. Hitchens believed that anyone who would use state power to insulate their delicate feelings as behaving fascistically. In his address at the University of Toronto, Hitchens said, I won't try and do his accent, but something. Bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that every time you violate or propose to violate the free speech of someone else, you're making a rod for your own back. Who's going to decide? To whom do you award the right to decide which speech is harmful? To whom do you give this job? To whom are you going to award the task of censor? Do any of you have someone you trust so much? Does anybody? Who would you trust to decide what you can and cannot read? Many scientific facts which seem in 2015 to be stupidly obvious, utter truths were minority opinions at one time, a round Earth, a heliocentric Earth. Those are revolutionary science at their time. And the men who advanced these ideas suffered or lived in constant peril for advancing them. Famous examples abound of historic discoveries that were stifled by gutless reactionaries that silenced scientists and reformers with violence of the state or the mob. But let's not forget that there are gutless reactionaries on all sides. When an idea is beyond question, it is dogma. Whether that is Holocaust denial, 9/11 truth, pictures of petty prophets, and so forth. Hitchens pointed out often and publicly that left or right, if you try to silence contrary beliefs and opinions, you court the totalitarian. I believe that is a primitive instinct we often flee to. So we must protect our, so that we might protect our dogmas and tender minds from dissonance-inducing concepts. When we are confronted with disruptive ideas, we must exercise our inhibition, not on their behavior, but on our own, and inhibit the totalitarian impulse in us all, and let malign voices be heard and duly considered and rejected if they are false. But never let them be prohibited. This is free speech. If you believe in free speech, then you should defend words you hate as passionately as those you love. Many of us here hold controversial opinions, and we enjoy the right to express them on a daily basis. Do not forget that this right was hard won, and it must be defended if it is to be maintained. When Danish cartoonists published their depictions of the Prophet Muhammad, mass media throughout the world quite cowardly refused to even show the pictures. We're preoccupied right now with Charlie Hebdo because of the direct human cost of it. But this tragedy was presaged years ago with the cartoons published in Jyllands-Posten in Denmark, and the barbarism which followed. Mass demonstrations, random violence against Scandinavians around the world, embassies burned. We shall recall the Danish flags being burned on the streets of Beirut and Cairo. I was surprised by this myself. After seeing flags burned from childhood to adulthood on the evening news, I was surprised to find that other countries' flags were even flammable. We could certainly take it, though. We're the United States. Denmark is a small, liberal, and free country besieged with threats from thugs and demagogues across the globe who demand that they subvert their own principles and even prosecute cartoonists if they do not want further destruction and loss of life. This extortion came through official channels, from the ambassadors of Egypt, Turkey, and Syria, and we did little as a country to come to their aid. Most of us watched with resigned fascination as the property and the economy of the Danish people were attacked, and to our national embarrassment, we did not stand with them. I view this as an abdication of our role as the best example of a free country in the world. We should be ashamed that we did, and we should be outraged at our own State Department's spineless lack of support for Denmark's free presses while they were under siege by violent protests and threatened with murder. We wouldn't even show the cartoons and news stories about them. What cowardice. I think this proves that fascist mobs can extort concessions even in this lighthouse of freedom, the United States. Christopher Hitchens wrote for the Massachusetts atheist periodical Free Inquiry. Some of you have probably seen that. They decided that they would republish the Danish cartoons. And Borders Books refused to distribute the magazine. They were afraid of violence. That's how the terrorists win, isn't it? I'm not too classy to point out that Borders went out of business. Barnes and Nobles did publish or did distribute both Free Inquiry and Harper's magazines with the cartoons, and I just had a latte there. So, good on them. Had we been ordered to censor cartoons by our own government, there would have been outrage and protest and principled refusals. However, the mere threat of religious violence is enough to cow us into surrendering our freedom voluntarily. By injunction or intimidation, the fascists have won this round, and we should hold our media in contempt for their cowardice. We should show solidarity with satirists and cartoonists. Let's not forget that satirical pamphlets like Common Sense, written by Thomas Paine, were treason in their time. Yet they not only sparked the revolution in colonial America, but they set the precedent for the Republic to follow that protected all speech, treasonous or otherwise, as a foundational principle. So what's happened to us? We would not brook such intervention by the state. Why should we by religious thugs? Hitchens said in his IQ squared debate in support of the motion, freedom of expression must include the license to offend. The First Amendment doesn't just provide me with a living. The First Amendment is my life. When it's infringed, I am offended. I do not claim the right to go burn down someone else's place of worship, to threaten their religion with violent reprisal, to picket their home, to publish their name in threatening terms on the internet. I don't do any of that. It doesn't mean I can't be offended, but it does mean that I'm even more offended by those who claim the right to seek violent reprisal. Take time out of your day to defend the hurtful words of someone you hate. It'll make you a better person. I promise. Voltaire said, "I disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." Thank you all for coming.